The world usually believes wars begin with missiles, explosions, or troops crossing borders. But sometimes, history changes in complete silence. Sometimes the most dangerous moment comes not from a battlefield, but from a room full of politicians who cannot make a decision. Tonight, in Washington, D.C., the United States government hit a political wall that could reshape the future of the Middle East, global oil markets, and the balance of power between America, China, and Iran. On the floor of Congress, lawmakers were locked in one of the most dramatic deadlocks in modern American political history. The vote froze. The chamber went silent. And suddenly, the question nobody could answer became terrifyingly simple. Who actually controls the path to war? As military aircraft continue operating across the region and carrier strike groups remain positioned near the Persian Gulf, America now faces a constitutional crisis hiding inside a geopolitical crisis. Some leaders are calling it a necessary show of strength. Others are warning that the world may be drifting toward another catastrophic conflict without public consent, without a formal declaration of war, and without a unified government. And the most shocking part is this. The deadlock itself may have created the exact conditions for escalation. Because in modern geopolitics, uncertainty is often more dangerous than aggression. Welcome to The Oversight. I'm Ruman, and tonight we are breaking down the Iran war powers deadlock, the political paralysis shaking Washington, terrifying global markets, and forcing allies and adversaries alike to reconsider whether the United States still has a clear strategy for the future. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This video is based on public political reporting, geopolitical analysis, and ongoing international developments. Some claims discussed remain disputed or speculative, and this content is presented for educational and commentary purposes only. To understand why this moment matters so much, we first need to understand what the War Powers Act was designed to prevent. After the trauma of the Vietnam War, American lawmakers attempted to limit presidential power by creating legal barriers against entering prolonged military conflicts without congressional approval. The idea was simple. No single president should have the ability to drag the country into another endless war alone. But over the decades, that law has slowly transformed into something weaker, more flexible, and increasingly vulnerable to political interpretation. Presidents from both parties have stretched its boundaries. Military operations became redefined as limited actions, defensive responses, or strategic deterrence missions. The language changed, but the result remained the same. American military power continued expanding across the globe, while Congress struggled to maintain meaningful control. Now, decades later, that unresolved tension has exploded back into public view. The recent vote surrounding Iran was supposed to clarify America's position. Instead, it exposed something much bigger: a deeply divided government unable to agree on the limits of its own power. One side believes strong military pressure is necessary to prevent future threats and maintain regional influence. The other believes the United States is once again drifting toward another open-ended Middle Eastern conflict with unpredictable consequences. But when the vote ended in deadlock, Congress didn't truly choose either path. Instead, it created a vacuum. And in geopolitics, power vacuums rarely stay empty for long. The moment the political deadlock became public, global markets reacted almost instantly. Oil traders, shipping companies, defense analysts, and foreign governments all understood the same thing at the same time. Uncertainty had returned to the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow stretch of water carries a massive percentage of the world's energy supply. Any instability there sends shockwaves through the global economy. The mere possibility of escalation can move billions of dollars in minutes. And this time, the fear wasn't simply about missiles or military operations. It was about confusion, because when the world's most powerful military operates while its political leadership appears divided, nobody knows where the limits actually are. That uncertainty becomes dangerous. Energy markets began pricing in the possibility of prolonged instability. Investors feared that even a small regional confrontation could trigger disruptions across oil routes, shipping insurance costs, supply chains, and inflation. Suddenly, this wasn't just a Middle Eastern story anymore. It became an economic story affecting Europe, Asia, and nearly every country dependent on stable energy prices. At the same time, America's rivals were watching closely. For years, countries like China, Russia, and Iran have argued that the United States no longer possesses the unified political strength it once projected during the late 20th century. Moments like this appear to reinforce that narrative. A divided Congress sends signals far beyond Washington. Allies begin questioning reliability. Adversaries begin testing limits. And that may be the most dangerous consequence of all, because geopolitical escalation often begins with miscalculation. History is filled with moments where governments misunderstood each other's intentions, weaknesses, or willingness to respond. Divided leadership can create mixed signals. Mixed signals create confusion, and confusion creates opportunities for mistakes nobody intended to make. Inside the United States itself, the debate has become increasingly emotional and ideological. Some Americans believe global military leadership remains essential to maintaining international stability. Others believe decades of intervention have exhausted public trust, weakened domestic priorities, and created endless cycles of conflict. This is no longer simply a debate about Iran. It is a debate about what America wants to become. Should the United States continue acting as the dominant global security power? Or is the country slowly entering an era of strategic retreat, where economic pressure, domestic division, and geopolitical fatigue limit its willingness to intervene abroad? The vote exposed how unresolved that question truly is, and while politicians argue over legal frameworks and constitutional authority, military operations continue in real time. Ships remain deployed, surveillance continues, regional alliances shift behind closed doors. Every hour of political paralysis increases pressure on global diplomacy. Meanwhile, ordinary people around the world are left watching headlines grow darker by the day. Fuel prices rise, inflation fears return, markets become unstable, governments issue warnings, social media fills with speculation, and the line between political theater and genuine geopolitical danger becomes harder to see. That is what makes this moment so unsettling, not because war has officially begun, but because nobody seems fully certain where the boundaries are anymore. Perhaps the most revealing part of this entire crisis is not the military tension itself, but what it says about the future of global power. For decades, the international system operated under a basic assumption. When the United States made a major strategic decision, the world would eventually see a clear direction emerge. Whether people agreed with American policy or not, there was usually a perception of institutional coordination. Today, that perception is fading. The modern world is becoming increasingly multipolar. China is expanding economic influence. Regional powers are acting more independently. International alliances are becoming more transactional. And domestic political division inside Western democracies is making long-term strategic consistency harder to maintain. This is the environment in which the Iran crisis is unfolding, and that changes everything. Because modern conflicts are no longer fought only with bombs and bullets. They are fought through economics, information warfare, cyber operations, energy leverage, financial pressure, supply chains, and public perception. In many ways, the psychological dimension of geopolitics has become just as important as military strength itself. Right now, every major global player is analyzing America's internal division. Some see weakness, some see unpredictability, some see opportunity. And that means every political deadlock now carries international consequences far beyond Washington, D.C. Even America's allies are quietly adjusting their strategies. Nations across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia increasingly understand that depending entirely on one superpower may no longer guarantee long-term stability. As a result, governments are building alternative partnerships, diversifying economic relationships, and preparing for a future where global leadership becomes more fragmented. This is why moments like this matter historically, because sometimes the most important turning points are not dramatic declarations or official announcements. Sometimes they are subtle signs that an old system is beginning to fracture under pressure, and tonight, many analysts believe we may be witnessing one of those moments. The political deadlock surrounding Iran is not just about one vote, it is about confidence. Confidence in institutions, confidence in leadership, confidence in the ability of governments to maintain stability during moments of extreme pressure. When that confidence weakens, uncertainty spreads everywhere. Markets react, alliances shift, adversaries calculate, citizens lose trust, and slowly, the foundations of the global order begin to feel less permanent than they once did. That is the deeper story unfolding beneath the headlines. And whether this crisis fades peacefully or escalates further, the consequences of this moment may continue shaping geopolitics long after the news cycle moves on, because the world is changing faster than many governments can adapt, and sometimes the most dangerous warning signs are not explosions, but hesitation. As the world watches tensions continue rising across the Middle East, one reality is becoming impossible to ignore. The greatest threat may no longer be simple military confrontation, but political paralysis inside the systems designed to prevent catastrophe. The deadlock in Washington revealed something deeply unsettling. In one of the most powerful governments on Earth, leaders could not fully agree on the limits of war, the boundaries of executive power, or the long-term direction of American strategy. And when governments hesitate during moments of global instability, uncertainty spreads across the entire international system. Tonight, carrier groups remain deployed, diplomats continue negotiations behind closed doors, markets remain nervous, and millions of people are left wondering whether this crisis is approaching resolution or merely entering a quieter, more dangerous phase. History often remembers the wars that officially began, but sometimes the more important story is how nations drift toward confrontation slowly, politically, and almost silently. This may become one of those moments. This has been The Oversight. I'm Ruman. If you want deeper analysis on geopolitics, global power struggles, economic warfare, and the hidden forces shaping the future, make sure to subscribe and stay informed. Because in today's world, understanding the system may be the only way to see the next crisis before it arrives.